This week, what appears to be the final chapter in the months-long saga over redistricting in New York. The state's political landscape for the next decade has been shaken up by the courts that ruled that Democrats in the state legislature created new congressional and state Senate district maps that were too partisan and redrawn to favor Democratic candidates in violation of the state constitution. So a map-making expert from Carnegie Mellon University was brought in to redo the maps, which were finalized and released over the weekend. The new map for the 21st Congressional District that covers much of northern New York has Fort Drum back within its boundaries, as well as two new counties, Montgomery and Schoharie to the south. Saratoga County and the city of Saratoga Springs were moved into the 21st District in a draft that was released last week, but then removed from the final map and put back into the 20th District. The North Country's 45th Senate District had all of Franklin County added back. It will also include nearly half of St. Lawrence County as well, with Canton, Potsdam, and Messina being added into the 45th. And former New York Congressman Bill Owens is with us this week. Good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and good to see you.
It is so nice to have you. These days, you're back at your law firm and a consultant and expert in U.S.-Canada trade, but certainly many know you as the former congressman from northern New York from 2009 to 2014. You went through redistricting in 2012.
Correct.
After the 2010 census. Was it nearly as controversial or as contentious as it is this year?
No, it truly was not. Now, that also went to a special master in the federal court system, not in the state court system. It didn't have the same tenor to it, though. People were much more aligned with the process. It just wasn't as contentious.
Part of the reason for the tenor is because what's at stake this year? The Democrats with such a razor-thin majority in the House and Senate, every single congressional race matters this year, and so that's why it's probably different than back in 2012.
Yes, absolutely.
Traditionally, though, the midterms have favored the minority party after a presidential election. Do many people think that the Republicans stand a chance of picking up seats and possibly the majorities this time?
I think very definitely. Many of the prognosticators are saying that it's moving in that direction. If you read the polling, you get the same inference that this is moving towards the Republicans. Having said that, though, there's a couple of things here, I think, that could change that. One is Roe v. Wade. That is likely to energize people on both sides of the aisle, but I think one of the places it will energize people are the suburban women who were a big player in 18 during those elections. And I think, again, this Roe v. Wade situation is liable to create that kind of fervor again. The second is, of course, the January 6th Commission. That's now beginning to, I think, heat up. And I get the sense that the Justice Department is now looking much more in a much more focused way on a number of people. There are a lot of pieces here that if they fell out in the next couple of months could be very problematic for the Republicans.
Voters in New York created an independent redistricting commission back in 2014 to make redistricting, the redrawing of the legislative and congressional district maps, less political. That didn't seem to work. The commission, made up of both Democrats and Republicans, couldn't agree on how to redraw the political boundaries, so it ended up in the hands of the legislature. The Democrats, who have the supermajority, redrew the maps, but that was challenged in the courts and got rejected, first by a state Supreme Court justice, then the appellate court and Court of Appeals upheld it, leading to this outside special master that we've talked about being brought in, a political science professor from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, who came up with the maps that this past weekend are now finalized, and barring any more legal action, will be the political districts of the land in New York for the next 10 years. Did the courts order the new maps because the earlier drafts of the congressional and state Senate maps were, in their opinion, too partisan, or was it more procedural, that they didn't take the right steps, they didn't follow the Constitution and the law that was passed by voters here in New York properly?
So I actually have the decision of the Supreme Court confirming the maps. And if you read through that decision, I think you see both things. I think there is a failure to follow the Constitution with the result that it was gerrymandered for Democrats. One of the things that I find here with great irony is, if you recall, Mr. Trump and a lot of Republicans talk about those Democratic judges. Well, guess what? The Supreme Court judge, Republican. Appellate division judges, mostly appointed by Democrats. Court of Appeals, almost exclusively appointed by Democrats. So what you really have in New York is judges doing their job, as opposed to, for instance, Florida, where DeSantis just got from an appellate court there the institution of the maps that he wants, all by Republican judges. So that irony shouldn't escape people, that you have this situation where you can understand why Democrats did what they did in New York, because they're watching the rest of the country and they're saying, fair's fair. Unfortunately, for us here, we actually have good judges.
And they did their job, and other states, it's played out much differently.
Yes.
And to the advantage of the Republicans. You've had
clearly
challenges there, but the Republican judges have
upheld those maps.
Do you think to the point where that's going to make a big difference?
I think it could very well. Now, in many of the states where that happened, they were already deeply red states. So I think the places where you would be most concerned would be those areas or states where you would get many districts that could flip. Pennsylvania is a very good example of that. That has a lot of activity. And so there, I think they've also done a pretty good job, though, of controlling the gerrymandering.
And here in New York, the Democrats have a few issues now with the redrawn districts,
Yes.
especially in the New York City area. There are now some competitive races, including one in particular, Congressman Jerry Nadler and Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney.
Yes.
Now are going to have to face each other in a primary in a new district.
Yeah, that's really one of the more surprising outcomes, that we have these two very senior people who lead important committees in Congress, and they are now in a position where one of them may not make it back to Congress.
Looking at the maps that came up from the legislature, do you think the party went way too far in drawing the maps in favor of Democratic candidates?
Yes, I do. Clearly it was an overreach.
And in your opinion, did the judges do the right thing?
Yes, they did.
So as far as our district here in New York 21, the final map out this weekend really didn't change all that much from the version that the Democrats came up with. A couple of last-minute changes. All of Saratoga County, including the city of Saratoga Springs, was moved out of the 21st district into the 20th. So Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's hometown will no longer be in the 21st district. She can run in the fall election, but then she'll have to move into the district if she wins.
Yes, correct.
Watertown is no longer part of the 21st district, but Fort Drum did get put back in. All of Fort Drum got put back into the 21st.
Yes.
And two new counties to the far south added to the 21st, Montgomery County and Schoharie County, way down southwest of Albany.
It's a function of numbers. You know, up here we do not have the numbers to reach that 720 or 750,000 people. So you've got to reach into areas that can give you that. And therefore it gives you a little bit of a discombobulated map, if you will.
Schoharie County, very red, about a 15% voter enrollment advantage for Republicans in this new 21.
It's an R15, which is very heavy.
Where before it was about 11 or 12%. So it sort of creates what some are calling a super Republican district in the 21st.
Oh, clearly. And certainly that was originally done because they tried to give Elise Stefanik a solid Republican district because they were going after people in other parts of the state where they thought they could gerrymander them. Now what they've got is a number of potentially flipped or flippable districts, either way, right? So you've got, I think, what now, 8 that are in play? 6 or 8 that are in play. You got solid 15 for the Democrats. I think solid Republican is 3. And so there's 3 or 4 that are then in play and could go either way.
So with such a Republican advantage in the 21st and being an incumbent, will this be a real challenge for the 2 Democrats running against her?
Clearly, it creates some hurdles. But, there's been some interesting developments in the last week or so. We have the Harvard professor who was her mentor saying she went to the dark side and has really, in his view, gone over the edge. You also have the Lincoln Project going after her for her ads where she's been incredibly negative about Democrats, saying truly harsh things. And so I think she's put herself out there where she's opening herself up to being attacked.